Hey friend, welcome to the Halfway to Dead podcast. I'm your host, Jen Lovell. Listen, you and I have reached that age where we are done with the bullshit. We know that midlife is our chance to flip the script and experience life on our own terms. It's time to reconnect with our higher selves and reclaim our inner peace. Are you ready with an open heart and an open mind? Awesome, you're in the right place. Hop in and ride shotgun with me on this midlife spiritual journey. Hi guys. So today I sat down with Karen Fabian. Karen is the founder of Bare Bones Yoga, and she has an extensive background in yoga teaching. In fact, what she does now is mostly she mentors a lot of yoga teachers. She specializes in not just the yoga, but anatomy and rehabilitative medicine, and then over 20 years experience in a variety of healthcare business settings. She's got her bachelor's degree in rehabilitation counseling from Boston University. She's got a master's in healthcare administration from Simmons College. And she's got all kinds of yoga certifications, of course, you guys. But we talk about her journey because Karen had basically the perfect little life on paper, right? She had a 6-figure corporate career. She was a doctor's wife. She had all the things going, and then boom, everything changed. So we talk about that today. We talk about what led her to where she is right now and what she's doing. And then she leads us through, she has these 6 pillars for confronting self-doubt and embracing new opportunities at any age. So we focus on us midlife women and these 6 pillars. And then she introduces us to this 5-day confidence challenge that is free that she has going on. So all the links are in the show notes, of course, but let's jump in because I learned so much. You guys, she had a lot to share. And no, this isn't just an episode all about yoga. If you're like, we've talked about yoga a lot. No, this is about life experience. And then these pillars and this confidence boost that we all need at this age, it's for all of us. All right. Doesn't matter if you're a yoga teacher or not, or even if you don't like yoga and don't do yoga, you're still going to get some great things out of this episode. All right. So let's jump in and hear everything Karen has to teach us. Hey, Karen, thanks for being here with me today.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So I kind of told everybody already a little bit about your credentials and your background in the yoga world, but I want to go back to your journey. All my listeners love hearing everyone's journey, especially you're a midlifer like us. What got you here? Was there a turning point? Was there something where it was like, okay, because I read on your bio, it said that Karen had the perfect life on paper. You had a corporate career, you had the works. So what happened, Karen? What was going on back then?
Yeah. So I sort of grew up in the traditional path of go to schools, go to college, get a degree, get a job. And my initial thought was I wanted to work as a physical therapist. I always had an affinity for medicine and medical care and hospitals and that sort of thing, even though as a kid, I hated going, like if I fell or had to get my tonsils out, any of that I did not like, but I always had an affinity for helping people in a medical context. So I thought I'd like to be a physical therapist. So when I initially went to undergraduate to get my undergrad degree in physical therapy, I thought this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. I want to be a physical therapist. And after a couple of years of that program, I thought, I don't think I just want to work with people's limbs. I want to work with the whole person, especially the mind. Like, why do people think the way they do? Why do people have certain beliefs? And so I switched from the physical therapy program to the rehab counseling program. And I ended up graduating with a degree in rehab counseling. And I started working initially at a treatment center for people with traumatic brain injuries. So these are your motorcycle accidents, your car accidents, your strokes.
Okay, so you were into the rehabilitation end of it.
Yeah. So that's what I did initially after I graduated from college. And I thought, okay, this is great. And I was really good at that. And I really liked being in the medical environment. And this was back in the late 90s when, I mean, things are so different now in terms of how people find jobs. But this was a time when recruiters would actually seek you out and try to recruit you, right? Remember these days, right? You'd get these random emails from recruiters. And so I actually got recruited to work for Blue Cross Blue Shield and to work in a department where I managed a whole team of nurses And we primarily worked with the cases that were the most expensive cases, the most complicated cases, the kids in psychiatric hospitals for over a year, the people with multiple disabilities that were in hospital for months and months. And me and my team of nurses, we created these elaborate discharge plans to get them home. And from there, I just kind of continued to get promoted and get recruited. And I ended up in this 6-figure job in this managed care consulting firm. And yeah, I thought I was in my, I don't know, early 30s. I thought, wow, this is great. I can shop at Coach and pick up a purse. I can shop for
you were living the life you dreamed of, being able to go buy whatever damn purse you wanted. You were there. You could go shopping. You could buy what you wanted.
And I was married to a doctor, somebody I went to college with, somebody who came into my life after years of being just a friend. And we ended up falling in love and getting married. And it wasn't like I wanted to be a doctor's wife. And I certainly never fit that mold, but we got married and he was a doctor. So that sort of was a thing from a picture perfect type deal. And at some point, and it's sort of a whole story, but at some point I decided, I don't think this person and I are really meant for each other. And so while I was in this corporate job, traveling all over the country, doing corporate like things, my marriage was really on the rocks and we tried to make it work. It didn't work. We got divorced. At that point, I had been living in Atlanta and I moved back up to Boston. And so when I came back up to Boston, I was still in that corporate job, but I had this opportunity to go take a yoga class, which to me was completely out of the blue. And I took this yoga class and it was like a bolt of lightning hit me. I knew when I was done taking that class, this is what I'm meant to do. After one class, this is such a blend of physical movement, mind, body connection, healthy living, lifestyle, muscle strength and length. And there was a whole sort of clinical piece to it, but not in the clinical setting. There was a whole exercise piece, but not in the exercise setting. So it really checked so many boxes for me. And on a personal level, I had such a profound experience that I really knew in that moment, I have found what I am meant to do. So from that class, which was December of 1999, I started going to classes more regularly. In 1999, yoga was not as popular as it is now in the United States. There weren't dozens of studios. So it was really, when you went to yoga class, it was a pilgrimage. You packed up your stuff, you drove 45 minutes, you waited outside. I mean, it was a whole thing, but I loved it. And so I was an avid student and then went to my first teacher training. I really bonded with a teacher here in Boston. And over a period of about 2 years, I took a number of trainings with this person. I knew that I wanted to quit my job, but I am pragmatic enough to know can't just quit your job and leave yourself with no money. So I sold my house in Boston. I downsized to a condo. This was in 2002 when the market was at that point really good from a house selling point of view. So I made $50,000 off the sale of the house, which I put in the bank. And I said, I'm going to use this 50K as a buffer as I build up my teaching schedule. I was a very logical, planned full person, which is the kind of person I am.
You didn't have your own studio yet. This was just you teaching.
This is me teaching for the person who trained me. So the studio I went to was owned by a particular person. When I took teacher trainings, it was with this person. And at the time, this studio system was really popular and this teacher was really popular. And it was at a time where there weren't a lot of options. So when I say popular, I mean, we would travel with him to all sorts of places and do trainings. And there would be hundreds of people that would show up. When he would teach regular classes in Boston, they would sell out. There would be no space. It was insane.
We didn't have those options. Yeah.
Right. So I knew, well, first of all, that was really all I knew. and I wanted to teach there. So from sort of a yoga career path, I volunteered at the studio, I put in my dues, and eventually I got a teaching opportunity to teach at the studio and also to work for this teacher behind the scenes on the business side. So
Okay.
I had crafted this life now where I was teaching yoga, or I was even working, which I didn't anticipate, behind the scenes for this person. And I'd sold my house and I had this little nest egg that was going to sort of hold me over. And I had this vision of building up my class schedule to the point where maybe I wasn't making six figures, but I was making enough to pay my mortgage and my condo, which I had downsized to, and that sort of thing. So that went on for about 18 months. And while I loved teaching, I was not making enough money.
No.
And I was teaching in this environment that was very much about everybody needs to do it a particular way, meaning the way of this particular.
You didn't have free reign to use your own techniques and venture into other forms of yoga.
No. And this was, again, at the time, pretty common. When you affiliated with a particular teacher, with a particular methodology,
You just stuck with that. Yeah.
You fell in line, and you were one of many people that followed this person. I mean, I don't want to use the word guru, but it's sort of there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you did. And you did it in exchange for deferred recognition, right? It's like, well, no one's going to know me, but they're going to know him, and I'm affiliated with him. And
I trained with him.
Yeah. And not that there's anything bad or wrong. It's just that you're definitely on the coattails of another person. So this idea of, even though I loved working for this person and I loved all the opportunity, it just never felt authentic to me because I felt like I was following somebody else's methodology. And at the same time, I was watching my little nest egg of 50K get lower and lower and lower because I wasn't making enough money to cover my living expenses. And it finally got to a point where I had to take out a loan to replace the 50K, which went away. And then the loan was starting to build up. So the pragmatic side of me was in a battle with the idealistic side of me who wanted to keep teaching yoga. But I did have concerns about, was this really the right place and the right way for me to do it?
Okay, because you went all in. You didn't make yoga your side hustle. That was brave. You went all in because a lot of people spend their time building up their yoga, practice by, it's just a side hustle. Yeah. And then when it's time, okay, maybe I can do this. But no, you were like, I got this. I'm doing it.
Yeah. And I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur, but in leaving my corporate career, I realized that I really am an entrepreneur at heart. And I really am made for working independently. And that was just something that I didn't know until I quit. And I think what made it a no-brainer for me is going back to that first yoga class I took and the profound impact it had on me, and the realization I had when I took that class that this idea of teaching yoga is such a beautiful amalgam of all these things I love, from the medical to the clinical to the helping people to the mind body.
I'm still sitting here. Listen, Karen, I'm still sitting here amazed that it was your first time there. Tell me more about this experience. Like you got in there, you're on your mat. Did you you didn't know what you were doing. It was your first time. So you're just learning these poses.
Yeah. I mean,
breathing, was it the environment? Were there certain positions where you were just like, oh, what's happening to me? What were you feeling that day? Because that's a big thing for it to happen the first time you went to one yoga session.
Yeah. And interestingly, the reason I went is because I had a guy friend who was going, and he was the one that encouraged me to go. Usually it'd be like, your girlfriend's going, but he was actually going because he was a bodybuilder and he was using yoga poses in his bodybuilding competitions when he was doing, when bodybuilders stand on stage and they do different poses. He was using yoga poses. So he was going to class and he was saying to me, oh my God, I found this studio that does this hot yoga and the teachers are amazing and it's really, really hard and you should come. And I think it was a combination of not just the yoga and the poses and the way it was presented. I think it was how it affected me and the journey I had had in my life up till then, and the things that I had an affinity for. Like if I had gone to college and studied English or business, it probably would have had a different impact on me. But going to college and starting to work in healthcare, I had such an affinity for helping people in a physical and not so much mental health way, although I had worked in that area as well.
You already had like a mind-body connection thing going. At this time though, would you say you're spiritual? Were you religious? What was going on in your mind? Like what was your upbringing that you were open to this feeling yoga gave you? What would you say about spirituality?
Well, I had grown up in a family that was Catholic, Italian-American family. So I grew up going to church. I didn't have a choice about that. Not that I had a problem with it. When I left home and went to college, I didn't really keep up with attending church on a regular basis. And while I considered myself Catholic, I naturally gravitated more to having an open mind and feeling a connection to more, not so much a higher power, but just an appreciation for being the kind of person who is in a growth mindset, who is open to different methodologies to feel healthy, not just physically, but also mentally. I did have some time in my career path when I did work as a rehab counselor, as a social worker, as not a therapist, but a vocational counselor. So I did have an opportunity to work with people in a counseling modality.
Yeah. So you were exposed to a lot of different types of people.
Totally. People with disabilities, both mental and physical. And I always had a real belief in an individual's ability to be better as they define it. And I also really recognize that a lot of people grow up with beliefs about themselves that really stand in the way of their greatness.
Yeah, limiting beliefs. We've all got them.
Right.
Yeah. And I ask all of this about your background because to me, it sounds like when something usually happens in one session like that, when I talk to people, it's an awakening at that moment. Like something in your body wakes up. Some people call it like, I had a Kundalini awakening, Kundalini yoga, or some kind of awakening. And it sounds like you had that in that moment.
Yeah.
So I just was curious where you were at spiritually at that time. Like, were you still a practicing Catholic? Were you open and all of a sudden like, ooh, I got to figure out more about the spirituality part?
Well, I mean, I was recently divorced because this class happened in the same year that I got divorced and moved back to Boston.
Yeah, it happened exactly when you needed it to. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very much happening at a time where I was open to change, where I was changing. And so I think that probably had something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Where are you at now spiritually? What have you grown since? I mean, that's been a long time since then. Yeah. Where do you feel like you're at now?
Yeah. So now, I do consider myself a spiritual person, although a lot of what I do that I guess you would consider spiritual is very, very approachable versus very, very dogmatic. So I very much being outside in nature, spending time with my dog. I do meditate. I do journal. I'm very, very into neuroscience and how different things that we do affects our mental health and our physical health when we look at things through the lens of neuroscience, which is an academic area. So, being a yoga teacher for 22 years, as I have been, I have the opportunity to have a very well-rounded group of people that I connect with in lots of different ways.
So you found what works for you.
Exactly.
You know you've been trusting your intuition.
Yes.
You know what resonates with you, and that's what you do.
Because of the industry I'm in and what I do, I run across all different kinds of people. So some people are really into astrology and some people are really into yoga philosophy. And, there's lots of different aspects. So I think for me, I fall into an area that is very approachable spirituality, I guess you could call it.
I get it. Then you decided to open your own studio, right?
Well, I actually did.
Not yet.
What I did was I got to a point where the 50K was gone.
Mm-hmm.
The loan ratcheted up to $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was absolutely at a fork in the road. I was either going to go back to a corporate job to pay off this debt, or I was going to have to figure out another way to make more money teaching yoga. So I very, very distinctly, I think most people can point to certain parts of their life where they get to that crossroad and they have to make a decision. And I very clearly remember the day that I called my mom and dad and I said, you know what? I just don't think I can keep doing what I'm doing the way I'm doing it. I have $30,000 in debt. I'm not getting more opportunities to teach within this system that I'm connected to. And I said, you know what? Let me call my old boss. Let me see if he'll take me back. And I'll keep teaching on the side until I can figure something else out. And so I called my old boss and I remember he said, what's up? That yoga thing didn't work out for you? And I was like, come on, you know? So I did shift at that point and I went back to work in the same company, different role, but I kept teaching on the side. And I said to myself in my head, I'm going to reemerge, but I'm going to do it my way. And right around that time, this was around 2009, there was a big economic crash.
Oh, yeah, we had a 2008, 2009, we crashed.
And everybody was getting laid off. And a lot of my students were telling me, I can't come to yoga anymore. I literally don't have any money to pay.
I can't afford it.
Classes. So I had a friend of mine who was a realtor here in Boston, and he told me about this renovated gas station. Like it was a gas station and they had taken away the pumps. They had painted the whole interior. They were kind of thinking, are we going to make it a restaurant, an art gallery? What are we going to do? And I rented that space for about 6 months and I called it bare bones yoga because it was bare bones. If you were going to come to classes here, you were going to bring your mat, bring your towel, bring your water.
Yep. There was nothing fancy going on.
And there was nothing fancy. And because I have a specialty in anatomy, it sort of spoke to that mission as well. My classes are really functional movement based. So that was how I came up with this name, Bare Bones Yoga. And after about 6 months of doing that, they needed the space back, but I kept the name and I decided this is going to be my brand. This brand is going to be what catapults me into my own methodology, my own business, the entrepreneurial side of things. And with that, I started creating a whole portfolio of teaching opportunities. I had left the studio system I was in. And I literally had a spreadsheet where I had a bunch of different tabs: children's yoga, yoga in libraries, yoga in studios, yoga in corporate settings, yoga in nonprofits. And I just was unrelenting. I just created, by cold calling and networking and researching, a whole portfolio of teaching opportunities all on my own. And as a yoga teacher, when you create opportunities on your own versus teaching in a studio, you can negotiate with the client as to what the rate is. When you teach in a studio, they're going to say, we'll pay you $50 a class and you're going to take that or you're not going to take it.
Right.
But when you're in a private contract with somebody like a company, or I taught in a number of different settings for children, preschools and libraries and nonprofits.
Yeah, you can name your fee for that.
Exactly. And so I basically created this whole portfolio of teaching opportunities and was able to then leave the job again and now reemerge.
And now you were ready
as an entrepreneur. And that started around 2010, 2011. And I've never looked back.
So we've still got Bare Bones Yoga. Now, primarily, and you guys, we're not going to talk a ton about yoga because we got more to talk about. But you're a mentor for other yoga teachers. That's kind of your primary thing.
I mean, the reason I wanted to do that and not completely leave the teaching part, although I wanted to have this branch of my business, which was mentoring other teachers. And that just catapulted or built up into a much bigger piece than I think I ever anticipated. And I got so much reward from helping yoga teachers that I knew this is really what I want to do primarily, almost even more so than teach classes. So because of my specialty and expertise in anatomy, and because so many yoga teachers have a really unsatisfying experience learning anatomy in their teacher training that they go to, the first one.
Yeah.
There's such a need for teachers to learn anatomy in an easy to understand way. So I created an online program, a training program that I now use to teach teachers all over the world, not just anatomy, but how to use it as a teacher in the cueing, in the sequencing.
Yeah, because you're working with yoga instructors who've already been certified, but they're building their confidence, they're perfecting their techniques, all of these good things. And because you guys listen, she's got 3 books for you yoga teachers out there. And she also hosts her own podcast, Conversations for Yoga Teachers.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole network going on with this yoga thing. What is going on in this yoga world these days? Because unlike when you started, I feel like we've got new yoga studios opening like Starbucks all over the place. So it's hard for us to even know where we want to go or what we want to do. And I'm going to ask you this, because I'm around through interviewing, through things I do, a lot of people on spiritual journeys, spiritual yoga is in a lot of that. Everyone's doing yoga along with it. I love yoga. Sometimes I don't. I'm going to be honest, Karen.
That's okay. I'm not here to defend yoga. Believe me. That's all good.
Oh, but here's the deal. For a group of men and women, and I'm talking about yoga instructors who are supposed to, in my mind, as a non-yoga teacher, be very namaste, elevated, right? I would think they'd have their ego pushed aside a bit. It's a little bit of a warfare zone out there. This is what I've noticed because I know people who own yoga studios. I know lots of yoga teachers, and there's this like cutthroat vibe going on. And I don't know if it's because everyone's opening studios now and everyone's trying to make it like like you had to make it on their own. But what is going on out in this yoga community with everybody really letting their egos take over and really, they're real. It's a little bit too cutthroat for me sometimes out there.
Yeah.
What do you think about all that? What's going on? Why what's happening?
I mean, the one thing I will say about the cutthroat part is when I scroll through TikTok, sometimes I'll get down a yoga teacher rabbit hole on TikTok and I'll run across videos that are sort of touching on some of the themes that you're talking about. So I know it is out there. And obviously I don't know the specifics of what you're speaking of, but I can generally get a sense of what you're referring to. And, here's what I would say on that. One of the things that's a big component of the way I work with teachers in my one-on-one program, because it is one-on-one, it's not a group. And the reason it's one-on-one is because of the 4 pillars that I focus on: cueing, sequencing, anatomy. And the 4th one is mindset. And mindset is something that's really never covered in traditional teacher training, but it's such an important part of what it means to be a yoga teacher, because all of what you're talking about, the cutthroat, the jealousy, the,
competition,
backstabbing, competition,
the lack of, I want to see everybody like women raising up women.
Right.
With whatever they're doing. And sometimes I don't see it in my community.
And all of what you're describing comes from the human experience, right? Like we as humans have certain tendencies to be triggered by certain things, to be triggered and be jealous, and to be triggered and feel competition, to compare ourselves with other people. We are like that as humans. And so now if we take those human conditions and we talk about somebody who's a yoga teacher, it's not as if they stop being human. I usually say to people,
but sometimes we as the clients, we want them to be right higher than us vibe-wise, because we're there partially for them to help us raise our vibes. And
Right. But what I'm saying is, if no one is working with a yoga teacher on the mindset component. What you're describing is what can happen.
That's what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not saying, well, if you want to be a yoga teacher, you need to go to therapy. Like, I'm not saying that. It's just that, and this is something really specific. If anyone is listening who is a yoga teacher, they will be able to relate to this. But I think anybody can relate to this just conceptually. There's something very different about teaching yoga than teaching any other kind of physical exercise, because it is a practice that's been around for thousands of years that does have a spiritual component as well as a physical component. And it's done in a way where you walk into a room with a bunch of people you don't know, and you're expected to lead them through this practice, but you don't really know what their medical scenarios are, what their injuries are. It's not like a personal trainer where the personal trainer is interviewing you beforehand and then they're working with you one-on-one. And in addition, all the other movement disciplines don't have this overlay of the history of the thing that touches on spirituality, a lot of what you're talking about, the namaste, the yoga philosophy. And so for a lot of yoga teachers, and I'm not saying this just to say it, I'm saying it because I've been training teachers in my program for years, and this is why I have a mindset component. For a lot of yoga teachers, when they walk into the room, they are triggered. Their humanness is triggered. The limiting beliefs come up. The I'm not worthy, the I'm not good enough, the I'm not qualified, the person who taught the class before me had more people and now I'm going to teach my class and I don't feel like I'm good enough. How come I don't have as many people as that person? So sometimes what the students see, things that you're talking about, can be connected to what the teacher is feeling, which is I'm not walking in this room feeling confident and competent and empowered. I'm walking in this room feeling like I'm not good enough. And so when you talked about competition and some of the other things, that comes from somebody who doesn't have an abundance mindset, right? All of what you're talking about comes from, I need to get mine. I need to cover mine. There's not enough to go around.
Yeah.
And unless yoga teachers have an opportunity to start to, and really people, right? Like all of what I'm talking about is in the context of teaching yoga, but it's our humanness, right? So we could talk about this in the context of a woman working in a corporate job and some of the limiting beliefs that she has about herself, right?
I think we just, as a society, we think we need to hold our yoga teachers up to a higher standard because, hey, they're supposed to be spiritual gurus. So what you're saying is just getting your yoga certification does not mean, you guys,
well,
that they're doing their inner work. It sounds like there's a lot of yoga teachers that also need to be doing their own inner work. Like you said, that mindful part of it.
It's not even mindful, it's mindset, right? And mindfulness. Okay. And like when we talked earlier, when you mentioned earlier about my confidence practice 6-point methodology, it's something I can use with yoga teachers, and it's something I can use or anybody can use, because it really, mindfulness is part of it, but the whole thing is really about confidence, which is a mindset, right? So, and I hear what you're saying, this idea of we go into class as a student and we sort of expect our teachers, and you're right, unless the teacher, I mean, I've had yoga teachers tell me about stories in their childhood that were being victimized or bullied or feeling like they were excluded. And when they walk in to teach their yoga class, they're flooded with that memory of going to a new school when you're a teenager, being like,
I'm sure it's very scary. It's like public speaking or anything else. Yes. Everyone's staring at you, expecting you to make this whole practice today perfect for them.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I can only imagine. No. All right. So everybody out there, we need to give our yoga teachers a little grace is what I'm hearing. Okay. All right. I know I sounded a little judgy when I brought that.
No, it's
okay. But they're just human like us. They're on a journey like we are. We'll give them some grace.
Totally. And most yoga teachers are really out there like islands. They're not supervised by anybody. That's why when I work with a yoga teacher one-on-one, they're just dying for the interaction, because most of them are just independent contractors and
And as a coach, you don't have any of that competition animosity, like if you're networking with someone at the same studio, there might be some of that there. Like, how many classes is she teaching? I want to teach that many classes. I'm sure there's drama in every job. Like you said, this isn't just yoga, you guys. I've had lots of jobs, there is always, a little bit of that going on. Okay. So let's move into, because you started to talk about, all your different methodologies and things. So 2 things. You like to help people flip the script from I'm told to do this to like, I have a vision. How do I make it happen? And does that go along with your 6 pillars, or is this 2 separate things? Okay.
Yes.
Because you guys, she has these 6 pillars for confronting self-doubt and embracing new opportunities at any age. All right. So let's focus this on at middle age.
Yeah, totally.
What are these 6 pillars? Because I know everybody out there is ready to get started. We're on our journeys and we're wanting to move forward.
So on January 1st of this year, one of the things I did on New Year's Day is I sat in my local Starbucks and I asked myself, in 2023 and 2024, I worked with so many yoga teachers one-on-one. And one of the common threads was that most of them were in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And this was a trend I was starting to see in the students that were enrolling in my program, that they were women who were at a point in their life where they were feeling like they were at a fork in the road, similar to what I was describing.
Yep.
And they had all in common that they practiced yoga and they had took an initial teacher training, and they knew that they wanted teaching yoga to be part of what they were doing in this next phase of their life. But all of them felt like there was a block to being a successful yoga teacher. And so a lot of the work in 2023 and 2024 I did with yoga teachers that fell into this sort of avatar had to do with a lot of these mindset things that we're talking about. So when I sat in Starbucks on January 1st, I started to sketch out in this book, what were some of the steps that I was giving what were some of the things that I was suggesting these yoga teachers experiment with in service to helping them feel more empowered and confident. And when I started to look at the list I was creating, I said to myself, this isn't just for yoga teachers. This is for any woman.
It's for all of us.
Especially a woman who is in this sort of midlife time frame where they're looking back and looking ahead, but might feel like, I'm not really sure how to move ahead because I've lived long enough that I sort of have this identity that's preventing me from thinking I'm the kind of person who can X. Fill in the blank, start a business, open a bakery.
Because we get stuck because we've done everything up until now that we've done what everybody else needed us to do.
Right.
And so then we get to this point, and we're like, what do I want to frickin' do?
Right.
Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do for this second half or less? Yeah.
Right. And a lot of teachers, a lot of women had families, and now the kids were in college and they were just starting to grapple with not having the kids in their home. So there were a lot of just scenarios that were in part a little painful, but in another part, a little bit of an opportunity. And so when I sat there in Starbucks, I started to write out a lot of the different, I call them experiments, that I was giving teachers to do. Because typically what would happen is I would meet a yoga teacher, they would enroll in the program, they would have a number of problems. And the problems were always related to limiting beliefs. Not always. Some of them were lack of knowledge base, but many of them were connected to a limiting belief they had about themselves. And so I would, instead of saying, oh, just get over it, get over that feeling you have that you're an imposter, I would give them an experiment to do. Well, why don't you go into your classes for the next 3 weeks between today and when we have our next call? And would you be willing to experiment with walking around the room more instead of practicing with your students? Oh, I couldn't do that. I'm going to feel so self-conscious. My husband tells me all the time, I'm the kind of person that's better as a wallflower. I'm not the kind of person that can stand in front.
When you're saying limiting beliefs, that's what you mean. These are examples of what, because if you're listening, you're thinking, what would my limiting beliefs be? Well, it's just something you've heard so much in your life, possibly.
Yeah.
And it was never true, but you believe it.
Right. And it could be something that comes from an experience you had. It could be something that somebody told you. Like imagine, I'll give you another example. In one of my first teacher trainings as a student. We all practice taught. We took the whole group of us, and each of us had a chance to teach for about 10 minutes. And one of the women taught her entire segment from the back. And when we were all done and everybody sat around chatting, we asked this person, we noticed you were teaching us from behind us. You weren't standing in front. And she said, yeah, it's because, and this is a woman in her 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's because I feel like I'm really afraid to show myself. And we were like, well, tell us more about that. Where's that coming from? She said, well, if you want to know the truth, I remember when I was going to school and I got to the point where I could pick out my own outfits for school. And the first time I picked out what I wanted to wear and I came downstairs, my mother took one look at me and said, there's no way you can wear that. That looks ridiculous. Go back upstairs and change your clothes.
Yeah.
And she said, I took that to heart. And I always grew up identifying as the kind of person who can't show themselves. Now, that story was 30 some odd years ago. And here was this woman, this grown woman, this educated woman, this successful woman who decided on the side she wanted to teach yoga. And here she was in a room with an opportunity to teach us. And she went all the way to the back. So the limiting beliefs that we have don't necessarily raise their hand and identify themselves, but we're sometimes operating as a result of those beliefs.
Yeah. And a lot of them do from our childhoods, because we're so malleable as kids, those first 7 years of life, that we can do some real damage to these kids. Even like you said, which is stupid comments that like, oh, that outfit looks ridiculous. You can't be in public. No one says you look like that.
Yeah. I've worked with kids as a yoga teacher for many, many years. And when I see kids, especially now, to me, when I see a kid, I think, God, I hope that that child is just getting nothing but love and good stuff, because exactly what you said, they're so malleable, and the identities that they develop as children will oftentimes be who they are as adults. And so a lot of what we talked about before with yoga teachers and backstabbing, these are the wounds, right? Showing themselves.
Yeah. There's some work to be done for sure.
Adults.
We're all in that boat, not just yoga people. Yep. That's all of us.
Right.
Oh, Lord.
So I want you to imagine spokes on a wheel. And at the center of the wheel is the word confidence. So in the center, this is what we want to get to. We want to get to, and maybe it's empowerment, maybe it's self-love. Confidence is what I picked because it's the word that I kept hearing over and over again. And I think the word confidence really transcends yoga teaching, and we can use it for women.
Everybody needs confidence. Absolutely.
Okay. So I call it the confidence practice, because it is a practice, right? If we want to live our lives in a confident way, it's not like, okay, today I'm confident and I'm always going to feel this way. It varies from day to day. So it's a practice, just like a yoga practice is a practice. You know, they always say, it's not a yoga perfect, it's a yoga practice. That's kind of a thing that we say. So I thought, what are the pillars? What are the things that can help attain the sense of walking around just feeling like this inner sense of confidence and self-worth? So the first thing I knew would be part of it is daily movement. Now I put yoga/movement. So it could be anything. It could be walking. It could be yoga. It could be running. But it has to be intentional movement. So our activities of daily living, while great, you look at your Apple Watch and it says stand up, and our standing desks and all that, the walking the dog. Yes, that all counts. But this is a different category. This is intentionally giving yourself time for movement. And it can look like whatever you want it to look like. So I knew that would be one pillar.
But for pillar number one, intentional movement.
movement.
Oh, it's not good enough just to go about your day. Like, I walk a lot at work.
Great. Right.
That's great. But you want to take a moment.
And for the purpose of exercise and health from a lifestyle point of view. And I mean, there's a whole track we can go down about the benefits of that. But if we're just saying, how does this help me be confident? Well, it helps me be confident because I'm taking time for myself. Exactly what you said before. I spent my whole life caring about everybody else. My confidence is depleted in part because I never put myself first. So when I say to myself, I'm making an appointment with myself every day to do some kind of movement, that helps me feel more confident because I'm a priority to myself. So that's number one. Number two is experimenting with things, what I call daily challenges. So it could be as small as I'm going to speak up in that meeting with that awful person that I work with who always cuts me off. It could be anything. It could be I'm going to say to my husband, you know what? I really would like to go out to dinner on Friday. I know we typically don't, but blah, blah, blah. It could be, you know what, honey, I'm going to take $500 out of our joint account and I'm going to the spa and I'm going to do a spa, whatever it is, right? It's experimenting with different things in service to challenging these limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves. So that's number two.
Okay. So vocalizing, we're vocalizing these things.
Yeah, it could be vocalizing thing. It could be even a really good example that I think about that I do every once in a while is to go out to dinner by myself, to experiment with something in service to me.
Solo travel. Some people have never traveled
Solo
alone.
travel, right?
So basically we want to just challenge ourselves to get out of our box and do something new.
Right. In the experimenting, we start to challenge the identity we have. Oh, I'm the kind of person that blah, 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 or I'm not the kind of person that could go out to dinner by myself and then you do it and you're like, oh my God,
yeah, I can.
I am the kind of person that can go out to dinner, or I am the kind of person that can strike up a conversation with somebody at Starbucks that I don't know, or it's all in service to challenging these limiting beliefs.
Challenging yourself and getting to know yourself again.
Right. So that's number two. Number three is self-inquiry. So self-inquiry can come through just meditation and asking yourself questions. It can come from journaling. It can come from visualizing. The idea is to have self-awareness and to ask yourself questions. Does it really need to be that way? Right? So if I feel like I'm really bad with money and I have a lot of credit card debt and I have this identity that I'm never going to be good with money, I'm always going to have credit card debt, and that feels awful, but that's just the kind of person I am. What if I started to journal or ask myself questions about, well, what would somebody do who's really good with money? And where do I believe that my limiting beliefs around money, where does that come from? Like, what if I started to ask myself, almost like I'm out of myself, asking myself, kind of like giving yourself therapy, but it's being in this, there's a particular mindset. It was I think she's a psychologist, Carol Dweck. She wrote this book called The Growth Mindset. And she described these two types of mindsets, growth and fixed. And when we have a fixed mindset about ourselves, we think this is the way I am and nothing's going to change. Kind of like that old movie with Scrooge, and he had all the ghosts come back. And then he realized at the end, hey, I really could be a nice person.
I could be different. Yeah.
Right. So the growth mindset is what we attain when we have this, self-inquiry happening all the time, where we're not just sucked into doing things the way we do it all the time. We're kind of open to questioning, like, does it have to be this way? Do I have to be this way? Do I have to react this way? So that's number three. Number four is meditation. I know people hear that and they say, oh, I can't meditate. Or don't make it meditation. If that word is unattractive to you,
people get scared of meditation.
Yeah. Just call it sitting in a chair for 5 minutes and closing your eyes, right? You could sort of make a case for walking in nature and walking meditation. You could make a case for that. It just is asking you to be in stillness. That's all it's asking you to do. And it doesn't come with a requirement that you sit still. It doesn't come, in my model, with a requirement that it be for a long, long time.
No.
The idea, though, is, you know how people say, oh, I didn't do that because my gut, I just had a feeling in my gut.
Intuition,
That. So your intuition, and this is where it might sound a little spiritual, your intuition will never be heard if you're constantly moving, because you can't hear it.
Yes.
Right?
Please, Karen, tell everybody.
So think about those times when you're on the beach and you're sitting there and you're in stillness, and all of a sudden you have this epiphany, and you come home from your vacation. You're like, man, I had that epiphany on the beach. It was because you allowed yourself to be still, that voice, that inner voice could be heard. And for women in their 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s and 60s, they have this whole life history. and all of what they learned, and that voice can really come through. There's so much wisdom there. It's just being in stillness allows you to kind of turn the volume up on that voice.
To hear your subconscious, to hear your higher self, to hear whatever. If you're spiritual, you're connecting with your spirit guides. You're connecting. Even if it's just yourself, you guys, even if you just want to connect with yourself.
Exactly.
That's how you do it.
So that's number 4. Number 5, I love this one. There's 5 and 6. So number 5 is visualization. Visualization is give yourself time every day to close your eyes and ask yourself, what do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to be? What do I want to do today? What do I want to do this week? This is your opportunity to see it. I mean, every time you hear an amazing athlete talk after they won the gold medal or did the thing, they always say, I saw this. I saw this from when I was young. I saw this the other day or whatever it is. I saw it last night when I went to bed. I saw myself crossing the finish line or winning this golf tournament or whatever. The seeing is part of the neuroscience. It's telling your brain, here's what it's going to look like in service to helping you do the things to make that happen. So visualization, more we can say on that, but suffice it to say that's that. And then number 6, the last one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is healthy habits. There's a lot I can say on this, but suffice it to say, healthy habits, we can really define it as what are you doing on a daily basis that promotes your health? And what are you doing on a daily basis that detracts from your health? Right? And we can, there's so many things that can fall into that category without making it too complicated. Even if we just frame it that way, people listening are going to be able to identify things that they're doing. There are a lot of strategies and approaches and specifics I can give you that fall into healthy things.
So this one seems like maybe the hardest for some of us because we've built up by midlife. We've got some health stuff coming at us now, right?
Yes.
We've got a lifetime of doing the wrong things.
Yes.
And so now we got to figure out how to get back on track with our health.
Yeah. The thing I would say about that, given what you just said, is you can just start small. Right. So one of the things that I think about as a movement professional for women in their 50s and 60s is weightlifting. I mean, we could go in a whole conversation about bone density as we age and estrogen levels.
I've been hearing a lot about this.
The muscular loss over time, which is not only related to age, but the drop in estrogen is so significant that, I actually just had a bone density scan the other day just for the hell of it, see where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so even something like weightlifting, I would guess that many of the people listening right now are not lifting weights on a daily basis. And and they may hear it and they may say, oh my God, I don't have the time. I don't have the weights. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. So again, this is where we start to bump up against our limiting beliefs. So what if we said, well, why don't I just experiment if I spent $50 on Amazon, literally had weights shipped to my front door. So no heavy lifting, heavy lifting, right?
Get them off the porch.
And just get them off the porch. And what if I just 5 minutes a day just lifted those weights? What if I did it when I was watching the Today Show, which I watch anyway? Or what if I did it at night when I'm watching?
You need to incorporate into what you're already doing.
Right. So now I'm doing habit stacking is what it's called. I'm connecting a new habit with a habit I already have. And so it's easier to get done. So that's what I'll say about healthy habits. You can start with something small, and that is how you build. When I work with yoga teachers, I call it the magic of momentum. The magic of momentum, we can look at it through the lens of neuroscience. We can look at it through the lens of energetics. We can just look at it through the lens of like feeling good about yourself. You feel good when you start to do the thing. And when you start to do the thing and feel good, it gets easier to do the thing, right? And to do the thing,
that's how we turn it into the habit.
Yeah, you just do a little bit. It doesn't have to be an hour, and it would be hard to start at that point. So you're just at that point, just a little snowball at the top of the hill. But as you start doing the thing, you're going downhill. It's getting easier and easier. The snowball's getting bigger, and you're building that magic of momentum, that feeling that I can do this. And now I'm changing the belief I had about myself from I'm not the kind of person who has time to lift weights to, you know what? I'm the kind of person who lifts weights. And not only am I physically stronger, I've dispelled this belief I have about myself. And therefore, I feel a lot more confident in my body and in who I am as a person.
Yeah.
So
all of these 6 pillars are all building that confidence, you said.
Totally. That's why the confidence is the middle, and the 6 pillars
are coming out.
If we look at the wheel, it's kind of like the
sun,
spokes of the wheel
with little rays coming out of it.
Exactly.
If you had to pick one, is there a most important one, or are they all just equally the same?
Well, here's what I would say. Because if we look at the science of movement, and again, intentional movement versus like the activities of daily living type stuff, right? There are so many hormonal changes from movement that affect our mood. When we look at movement with people who live with depression, just movement can sometimes have the same effect as pharmacological intervention. So if I was on an island and I could only pick one, I would always pick movement, because the cascade effect from movement affects everything else. So, so we've got these 6 pillars. And as you mentioned, one of the things I did when I sat in that Starbucks that day was I thought, okay, if these are the pillars, what's an easy way to help somebody experience these with a little bit of support? So that's where I created the 5-day confidence challenge. And I basically mapped out a 5-day self-guided experience that anybody can do. And what the 5-day confidence challenge does is it walks you through. Day 1 is self-awareness. Day 2 is body confidence. Day 3 is communication. Day 4 is overcoming fear. And day 5 is finding your fit. This is actually about what you wear and your clothes and feeling good in the things that you wear. And so every day, like for instance, in the body confidence, day 2, one of the exercises you'll do is you will pick a power pose. So this has a little bit of a yoga connotation, but it's really more a self-empowerment connotation. A way to move your body in a particular shape that makes you feel confident. So think about a woman who maybe is sort of quiet and thinks of themselves maybe as a quiet, behind the scenes type person.
Yeah, introverted. Yep.
And then that person maybe goes to a yoga class and does a particular shape and feels like, man, or goes for a run or does something physical and feels like, wow, I sort of feel out of my body. Like this is a shape of my body. This is where the neuroscience and the biology comes into play. So day 2, one of the exercises that you do in the challenge is to pick your power pose. And to do that pose. And especially, I know for me, when I worked in corporate, there were plenty of presentations I had to do and board meetings I had to do and trade shows and meetings with my boss, where if I had known about a power pose, I would have been doing that pose in the bathroom before I went to that meeting. And so this is all in service to giving you a little structure to make
So like, what's your power pose?
Yeah, I would say my power pose is from a yoga point of view is warrior 1. So warrior 1 is a lunge with your arms up in the air. And I would say that is a shape for me where I feel really, really grounded. I feel the strength of my legs. I feel my feet rooting into the ground. And because my arms are reaching up, I feel like I'm taking up a lot of space. I'm the kind of person that I'm a pretty big personality, so I don't really identify with not being able to take up space. I like, though, the idea of doing something physical where I am taking up a lot of space, because that to me gets my blood pumping and it feels like a very empowering.
Once we find our power pose, on day 2, we're going to find our power pose.
Yeah.
Is this a pose that we do then before we're going into a situation?
I mean, it might just be in the exercise of doing it in the context of the 5-day challenge. You may just trigger some good
Okay, so we're
feelings
not
about
like,
yourself.
before we head into our meeting, we're not doing a big power pose for the world.
Well,
are we visualizing it?
You could visualize it. You could do it. I mean, I'll just tell you a quick story. One of the most watched TED Talks is a TED Talk about power posing by a psychologist, Amy Cuddy, here in Boston at Harvard. And she actually did a study where she set up sort of fake job interviews. And she had one group of study participants pick their power pose and do it before the interview. And she had another set of study participants who did not do a power pose. And she took saliva samples from them and measured their testosterone levels, both before and after the power posing for the one group, and the reaction of the interviewer. And she found the people who did their power pose before the interview had a higher testosterone level and were also perceived as more appropriate for the role than the control group who didn't do the power
That
posing.
makes sense because it's all about the vibe we bring into a room too. If you're boosting your confidence before you go in, whether that's a power pose or whatever, like the other person in the room is going to feel it.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. And there's a lot of experts in body language where they'll look at women in corporate settings and men in corporate settings and things like, what's the typical way that a man will sit in a meeting versus what's a typical way that a woman will sit?
Yeah,
so
the body
a woman
language
might oftentimes kind of hunch and
kind of cover up,
where a guy might sort of take up a lot of space.
Take up space.
And all those things communicate non-verbally to all the people around you. And so we can look at this through the lens of women, men. We can just look at it through the lens of people and how they feel about themselves. I mean, when you look at people who are clinically depressed, they hunch, they hold their arms in, they don't look at you straight in the eye. I mean, these are all, when I worked in the clinical setting, these are all physical manifestations of inner scenarios, inner conditions.
Yep.
And even if we're not dealing with a clinical challenge, how we feel about ourselves comes out in how we hold our bodies.
Yes. That makes total sense. Just like if you see someone with their arms crossed, you're less likely to go up and talk to them than someone who's looks more open, open for you to come walk up and say hi. So we've got 5 days to the challenge.
So we've got 5 days.
That should help kickstart this whole thing anyway.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for any of your listeners that do it, I would love to hear your experiences. So you can always send me a direct message on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga and tell me how it goes.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love a good challenge. Yeah. Okay. So, and it's all outlined in the link, you guys. So link it.
Yep. All outlined. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. That's going to be really good. I'm going to try that out. Okay. So we all got to be working on these 6 pillars.
Yeah. I mean, you'll get to the 6 pillars as a function of doing the challenge. My vision for the second quarter of this year is to create a self-guided mini course that takes people through the 6 pillars in the confidence practice. So it's sort of a standalone self-guided course that you can take yourself through, and I'll be building out each pillar. To start though, when I sat in that Starbucks on January 1st, I created the 5-day confidence challenge as sort of the precursor to kick this.
To kick the whole thing off.
Exactly.
Yes. So you do that first, and maybe by the time we're all doing that, then we'll be ready for your self-guided.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect. All right. So we didn't need to talk a lot of specific about yoga today, guys, with Karen, because she's got a lot of knowledge from all these years of teaching yoga,
right?
And yoga teachers and all of this
right.
stuff.
And that's the thing. And that was really sort of, when we were talking earlier about my fork in the road, I sort of feel like on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, just past 2025, I sort of came to another fork in the road when I was sitting there in Starbucks and I was starting to map out, what do I want 2025 to look like for my business? I said to myself, you know what? I so firmly believe that what I'm doing with yoga teachers, I've seen so many of the epiphanies that yoga teachers have had. The most profound ones that I've witnessed didn't really have to do with teaching yoga. It really had to do with the woman having a realization about her potential as a person and having this realization that I'm developing a better relationship with myself as a result of experimenting with these different things in my classes to challenge some of these beliefs I have about myself. So when I was sitting there in Starbucks, I was like, I can create this separate track that really is serving not just yoga teachers, but women that are at a particular phase in their life when they want to feel more confident as the catalyst to doing something different. So
So this is for all of us. We can all you don't have to be a yoga teacher to get on board and learn all of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like people benefit from the behind the scenes of how I got here, but how I got here is through training teachers in this specific methodology that I have.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've got a lot of yoga teachers in our listening audience too.
Yeah.
So, hey, look into this stuff. She's got her podcast. She's got her books. You might need some one-on-one to really like get your shit together in this.
Yeah. That's a nice sidebar. If people are listening and they are yoga teachers and they identify with that triggering feeling when you go into teach or you feel like you're just in a problem state, I definitely can help you with that specific track.
And if you're a yoga teacher out there, let me just tell you from my point of view, if you're up there worried about what we're thinking, I'm not thinking about you like that.
That's exactly.
For the record, I think you're amazing for even being there teaching yoga. Right. I'm worried about me. Right. I'm worried about what I look like in that room. Right. I'm worried about my own skill level. And I like, really, guys, you can just relax because the rest of us are really not judging that hard.
Right. And see, that's such a perfect, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I sort of wish that I'll actually share this when it goes live with my audience. So they'll hear from your point of view as a person taking classes. This is such a beautiful illustration of a teacher can be in her head and thinking the student is thinking one thing and the student's thinking something completely different. And just like you said,
all thinking something completely different.
It's not about them. It's everything.
Honestly, we're sitting out there a little bit jealous. We're a little bit jealous because you know your shit and we kind of don't. And we think we're being judged in the room by the others around us.
Right.
Okay.
No,
especially if it's damn hot yoga. I'm worried about my sweating. Yes. I'm worried about if I'm going to pass out. I got a lot on my mind other than what that teacher's doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why when teachers say to me, I'm so nervous to share something at the end when people are resting. And I say to them, you know what? Say whatever you want, because most of the time they're not even really listening. They're just relaxing and maybe they hear this voice in the background, but they're not always really focused on what you're saying because they're just in their own experience.
I like when people say something. I like to be like in my zone, the final little savasana. I go to one little place that puts the little lovely smelling lavender washcloth on my little forehead. Love that. And then I love when they end it with like some inspirational little, like a poem or a word or something just to send me on my day, like a little bit better than I came through the door. I like that.
Most of the teachers that I talk to, they feel like the bar is way up here. Like if I don't hit this bar, I'm a failure. And it's like, girl, you just got to show up as yourself and people will embrace
be attracted to your authenticity. Yeah. You'll find your people that need to be in your class, but just based on your authenticity alone. All right. Well, I've learned a lot. Yeah. And I'm not even a yoga teacher. I learned a lot from you. Yeah.
Awesome.
No yoga training. Trust me on that.
But you can see how it is all global stuff.
We're all in the same boat. No matter what's going on, we're all trying to we're on our own little journeys, our own paths. And if we can just give each other a little grace and let people be on their path, that'd be great too, everybody. But we got this, Karen, don't we?
Totally got it. Totally got it.
We got this. And if you need a little help, that's what I'm bringing to all these people here on the show. If you need a little help, there is help out there.
Yeah.
You can do it alone, but you shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, even this morning when I was going for my walk and I was listening to a podcast, it was an interview with Joe Dispenza, who's a longtime spiritual teacher. And he was talking about how when people want to make a change and they don't change, he said something that really hit me. It was something to the effect of doing nothing is the same as making a decision, because you're basically in this knowledge space of knowing that you need to make a change to be not be a better person, but to have a better
decision. You've made the decision not to do it.
Exactly. And that was the point of what he was saying. And when he said that, I thought, I speak so many times to people who they're at that fork in the road and they'll say, oh, the time's not right. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, I'm not worth it. Oh, I don't have the money. Like and in that not moving forward, that's the decision to just kind of keep things as they are. And I always see people through the lens of that vision of their highest potential.
Yes.
And oftentimes people aren't seeing themselves, they're not ready to see themselves in that way until either the pain level gets so high in their life that they are forced to change, or they get motivated from some other source and they just decide, you know what, today's the day I'm going to take that step forward.
Yeah, we got to do it. No decision is a decision.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Karen, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot, you guys. And so
I'm glad.
All of the links in the show notes to all of these things. Yep. So we can all start this 5-day challenge together and figure this all out.
Yep. I would say the 5-day challenge link, definitely. And then the other place that I'm super active is Instagram. So I'm Bare Bones Yoga on Instagram. So if people grab the challenge and do it, you can always send me a little note. I'd love to hear how it goes. If anybody's a yoga teacher listening and they're like, man, I'd like to find out more about how I could work with Karen or just chat with Karen, Instagram, in my bio, I have links to both my programs, my group program, my one-on-one program. But you can also just send me a message and just be like, hey, I heard you on the podcast. I'd love to chat.
Yeah. If you're like, I don't have the budget to have anyone help me right now, you can start by reading her books, listening to her podcast, getting some information like that. And then when the time is right, you'll connect.
Yeah, totally. The podcast, we're up on like 340 episodes, so we got a lot of stuff.
You're going to be able to listen to that for a long time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, dive in there, guys, because there's a lot of yoga teachers out there. So if you want to up your game and stand out from the crowd, because there is a crowd now.
And feel great doing it. And feel
like,
it's
feel
easy,
really
it's
good.
fun. And I want women to feel like they're living their lives driving the car. The car is not being driven for them. They are driving the car. They are doing what they want, and they feel successful and rewarded and like they're contributing in a way that feels so natural to them and so authentic that it's completely effortless.
Oh, I like the sound of that, Karen. I like the sound of that. Okay, let's do it. All right, you guys, let's do it. Click those links. Let's get this challenge going. I like it, Karen.
Well, you have to let me know too how it goes.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to look through this. I'm going to figure out this challenge thing because as a non-yoga person, I'm doing it too. And we can all use a boost in our confidence. Come on.
Totally.
Yeah, that's kind of a big thing with women because limiting beliefs we've already been embedded with. We got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Yep. Take up space, girls. Take up space.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, you're going to have to come back and talk to us about other stuff. But for now, I'm going to let you go. So I'm not going to take up your whole day. But thank you so much for all this information.
Thank you for having me on
the journey. And if you guys are listening, this is resonating with you, you know this episode was for you. I talk all the time about everything's not going to resonate with you that you listen to or hear, but something will. And so if this is that episode, you know what you got to do. You got to start clicking. You got to send messages. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a decision. A non-decision is still a decision, you guys.
That's right.
Don't put it off.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Fun. All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Listen, I know your time is valuable. And right now, I'm feeling super grateful and totally humbled that you chose to hang out with me today. If this podcast resonates with you, could you do me a solid and hit that subscribe or follow button? That's going to help you out because you're never going to miss an episode. And it helps me out because you're never going to miss an episode. And if you have like 30 seconds more, could you leave a 5-star rating and maybe leave a kick-ass review? Thank you so much. And I can't wait to continue our journey on the next episode. Oh, and I can't forget the fine print. You know, the legal jargon. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. We're just two friends on this journey together. And this podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional. You get it. See you next time.